Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our 30 on Thursday webinar, Advanced Security Management for Office 365. Just a little bit about Protiviti before we get started. We are a global consulting firm providing solutions to business problems in technology, business process analytics, risk, and internal audit. Our full-service enterprise content management team has helped hundreds of clients realize the value of SharePoint and Office 365. Our 30 on Thursday webinar series is in its 6th year now. It's a 30-minute bi-weekly webinar series where we talk all things SharePoint, Office 365, and ECM. Our next webinar will be on July 13th, where we will be talking about self-service BI straight from SharePoint. You can register for this webinar and see our full event schedule on our website, ecm.protiviti.com. Our ECM team can help your organization take full advantage of Office 365, from migration and planning to on-demand support packages, security and governance strategies, hybrid solutions, and so much more. Our team can help you take full advantage of Groups, Power BI, Delve, Planner, and all of Office 365's features. If you're interested in learning more, please visit our website. Today's session is being recorded. You can access the recording of today's session and see all past webinar recordings on our YouTube channel. For questions during the presentation today, please insert them in the GoToMeeting toolbar or live tweet us your questions using the hashtag 30T0365. We'll save all the questions until after the presentation today. Today's presenter is Liam Cleary, 10-time SharePoint MVP and Associate Director here at Protiviti, and I am Julia Marple, and I will be moderating today. Liam, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Okay. So let's get started, just to make sure you can see my screen.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So let's talk about advanced security management. So before we go straight into it, let's just understand something about licensing. It's part of the E5 Office 365 license, so it's bundled with that one. Any other license, it can be added by combining it with the Advanced 365 Security Management at $3 a month. So there's a combination of joining those two together. The core features of the Advanced Security Management is threat detection, which lets you identify high risk of normal usage and security incidents. You've also got enhanced control, where you can apply granular controls and security policies to either individual users, groups of users, or specific applications. And then also it offers discovery and insights, allowing you enhanced visibility into Office 365 usage outside of the regular somebody uploaded a file, somebody downloaded something. This gives you a more granular approach across all services in Office 365. The purpose of the Advanced Security Management is kind of broken into 6 key areas. First off, you can see how your organization's data in Office 365 is not only accessed, but also used. So more of, are we opening, are we closing, are we sharing, are we sending it into a different system, are we uploading out of Office 365 into something like Dropbox or Box or some other application. We can also control access to Office 365 data for within mobile devices and applications. So for example, restricting access to a third-party application that someone's trying to connect into 365. We can also then define policies that will trigger alerts for what we class as atypical or suspicious activities. And an example of that we'll kind of walk through, but one of those would be, for example, an impossible login. So for example, you log in one location, and then all of a sudden your account logs in a completely different geographical location, which is physically impossible due to traveling. You can't actually get that far apart. This will get flagged as an atypical or a suspicious activity. Outside the back of that, we can suspend user accounts that exhibit any of these suspicious activities. We can actually require users to log back in to Office 365 when an alert's been triggered, just to confirm. So an example of that would be if we did find that impossible login, we could then alert the user and say, you need to log back in to confirm that this is you. And of course, lastly, it's all about creating security dashboards, looking through the information, using it to search and filter. So let's go straight into looking at the advanced security management. So I'm within my Office 365 tenant and I am a global administrator, so I have access here. Now, in order to gain access to the actual advanced security management, we need to come down to admin centers. Now, your tenant may not have all of these options, but the one it will have is security and compliance. So I'm going to click security and compliance. Once again, you need to have a specific level of access to gain here. So a global administrator, or there are specific permissions that you can assign that will allow someone to come in and access the advanced security management features. Now, to access this, we're going to click alerts, and obviously this is where we can do basic alerting. But when we're talking about advanced security management, we're going to click manage advanced alerts. And this will obviously give you a little welcome screen, and then you're going to click the blue button that will say go to advanced security management. So we'll wait for this to load. Now, just by information, you're actually leaving technically the Office 365 tenant that you're in and accessing a different service. Even though it's branded here as Office 365 Advanced Security Management, for all intents and purposes, you've moved into a web application that's connected to your tenant. Now, the first view, when it loads, just gives you a view of the policies. And you can access these from the control menu itself. If I just change that to templates, this will give you an idea of some of the base templates that are available out of the box. So, for example, regular anomaly detection, mass download by a single user. This is quite a useful one. You know, it will alert you when a single user has downloaded 30 things within a 5-minute window, and then you can be notified of that. It could be a risky IP address, or it could be some ransomware. And you can obviously create your own templates at this point and define what's there. So the key is you build a template, you then build a policy based on that template, and then the policy is then what categorizes the information that comes in. So if I click on policies, you'll see that I have some predetermined ones here. So I created one called capture internal logins, which I'll look at in a second. Capture logins from people that are coming in from a specific IP range or internet provider. I want to capture people that are creating policies inside the advanced security management, because remember, the advanced security management doesn't exclude me as the IT or the global admin. It should also include things like what I do. Also, general anomaly detection. So if I click on this one, this will give you a breakdown and say, hey, we didn't find any alerts that match that specific thing. But if we go to the policies themselves, we can then come over to here and we can disable or delete. Or actually, I can just look at the settings for this specific policy. So you'll see this says it's a pre-configured one. It's going to check for certain things, and we categorize it as a threat detection. Now, what's important is the out-of-the-box ones just capture everything, which is great, but that does cause lots of information to be captured. But if you check selected activity, you'll see that I can then start to filter. Let's say we choose activity type, and you'll see that I have access to a whole host of different activities that I can specify. So for example, maybe I want to capture who's accessing files, or maybe I want to who's blocking apps. Maybe I want to use the search and I can type in the word share, and then this will say, well, I want to capture who's sharing a file or sharing folders or creating a shared link. Now, not everything should be classified as a threat. You'll see there are some categories that we can drop things into. So for example, if I want to create a policy that will capture anytime anybody shares content outside of the organization, I don't want to classify it as a threat. I can classify it as a sharing control. Now what happens then is when the results come in, we can then filter based on the type of category. Now you'll see that obviously I can choose an activity, so I'll say file requests. I can also combine different things together, so I can say I want to make sure that it's from a specific IP address, or I can go down and say from a specific location, countries and regions. So you can start to create this filter for very unique activities targeted to very specific locations or IP addresses, and we'll see that in the results in a second. We then have some risk factors that come into the general anomaly, and you'll see, for example, if I click on login failures, once again we'll log in everything, but I could select the activity, and you can see that I can go through and start specifying all of these values. Now that's just an out-of-the-box one. We aren't going to make a change to that, so I'm going to click cancel. But what we can look at is I created a Capture internal logins, and I created Capture India logins, for example. If I choose internal network logons, you'll see that what this does, this brings back some results now. I specified this, that what I wanted to do was capture any login that came from a specific network or IP address, which happens to be the internet connection that's at the back of the building that I sit in. So you can see that this has brought back results. So for example, I've got one here where I've been editing policies, or I've been accessing files. And you can hover, so this for example is one of the XSL files that's just used in a star library. If I click on this, this will actually give me a breakdown of the information. So you've got my test account here, you've got the policy that was matched, you've got the URL it was trying to get to, even down to whether it was a PC, whether it was a Mac, what version of Windows, what was the browser I was using, down to location and the internet provider that's being used. So we get a whole host of information that's available to us in any of the actions that come through. Now if we click on Investigate and choose Activity Log, I can get access to a whole host of activities that are not filtered by the specific policy. So for example, I obviously accessed OneDrive for Business here. This tells me that was my photo that was being loaded, and you can see that it said it was the UK. And that's because I was testing on a different machine VPN'd into the UK. So it gives me this ability to see where traffic is coming from. If I didn't want that traffic to show, I could then come and say Add Filter. And you'll notice that the filter changes, and it now says look for other people that have connected in from the UK or from a specific IP address or a specific device, because I can then filter those information out, and then I can start to create filters and policies and create new policies that will then alert me based on information that's there. So let me go back to my activity log. This will go back to the regular. Now from the list of apps, you'll see that we can do general Office 365. I can do SharePoint Online, Exchange, OneDrive, or I can even include the Advanced Security Management as an application. So I can see, for example, this was an action that was created by me. I created a new one. I could click Protect More Apps, and we're not going to go into this because this takes it into another solution from Microsoft, but it means that if I'm using these third-party components, that I can then retrieve that information directly here inside. Now you'll see here the alerts option has come up. So based on my policies, if we go back here, obviously something has been captured and is now listed in the alerts for the specific policies. So you'll see that my internal logins has been captured. So I can click on one of these, and this will give me a breakdown. So it's kind of a more detailed breakdown of the normal log that we went through. You can see that it tells me the policy, it tells me the service, the IP address, the country, and the user that I'm actually looking at. I then have some options right here where I can set some resolution options. I can suspend the Office 365 account at this point, because I will have been emailed this notification too, so I can then say suspend the Office user. For example, if you know the user is sitting in the office next to you, but you get a notification that someone's logged in a different country, you can literally just say suspend the account. Or I can say force the user to log back in again, or I can actually go and have a look at the account options itself. I can also then adjust the policy if I want to say, you know what, that was actually valid because it was Liam, he logged in from his machine in the office, and then he actually remote desktoped into a server in a different country and was just testing. So actually I need to just dismiss that, or I can adjust the policy so it doesn't capture. So you get the ability to teach and train the Advanced Security Management a little bit more, because remember, it's all machine learning in the background that's kind of creating this. In the activity log, you obviously get more information that's available. Obviously this information was from the actual log file itself. And then of course, when we scroll down to the bottom section, I can then look for the information that comes through. So I can click on here and click apps, and you'll see that right now this is active, and this was a previous one that I logged into. It also tells me that, oh, it's okay, Liam's a company administrator, and he's one of the ones that's able to make those changes and access that information. You can then select on any of those rows. So for my Protoso test account, I can actually come in and say, well, actually, I'd like to look at, requiring the user to sign in again, or I can view the app page and view more information about what's been logged. If I click on Investigate the log further, this will then go through and look for a specific alert ID, which will then give me more information. I can then also go through and say, well, actually, I'd like to look for more activity of this same type. Because, of course, when you're looking for threats, you're looking for patterns, things that look like normal traffic, but obviously are not. So I can say I could look for all the user activity for me. I could look for activity that's coming from the same place, a same IP address, or of the same type. So if I say the same country and region, this is now going to go and filter back and say, well, this was the alert that popped up. Now show me other content that relates to that one. So if I want to remove that, I could actually just say, show me everything from that country. So you have the ability to discover and define what the type of queries and policies that you want to create. Now, if I click on the policies, I can actually say I want to create a brand new policy. Now, you can determine whether it's an activity policy. Now, this is going to be driven by types of user activity, or it can be an anomaly detection. If I choose activity policy, I get to choose from a series of templates. So these are the default ones. I don't actually have to use a template if I don't want to. So I'm going to say no template. And then I can start filtering and creating what I want it to block, or what I want it to at least show up as an alert. So I'm going to call this test policy and give it a description. I'm going to make it a high severity. And then I can determine how this fits. I'm just going to say it's a threat detection for now. And what we can do is we can leave it as a single activity, which means that I can come into here and say, what I'd like to do is pick a user from a specific group, and then I can start say, well, I want to say, well, for all external users, as the actor, I want to capture information from external users. Or I could come back in and say, I want it to be, is it an administrative activity? Or I could actually just choose a specific activity type like we talked about before. So, for example, I could say add a permission to a mailbox. So I want to capture anytime anybody changes permissions. Now, of course, that's great. That's just one single activity. But actually, you might not want to capture every time a single one. You may be looking for what referred to as repeated activities, which means that somebody may have compromised the environment and may be making lots of changes. So you could say, actually, I'm looking for a minimum of 10 permission changes on mailboxes within a certain time frame. Once that's been done, then it means that that'll start capturing at that point. Because a single activity, if we just put it as that, is probably quite common. Somebody might change a permission. But if somebody is repeatedly changing permissions, that's something that I want to be alerted to. Once we get down to alerts, I can specify, what's the limit of alerts that I get each day. So maybe if we capture in this, I might only want to get 5 alerts, or if it's important, you might say, just keep notifying me that these, unlimited amounts of alerts. I can send them as emails. So if I just set my account, I could also send them as text messages and just put my phone number in here, depending on what this is. So this is important when you're creating the policy. Depending on the type of activity, you may determine that some of those are okay to get as emails, some of those are okay to get, or actually really important to get, as a text message. So for example, an impossible login, or maybe a failed login attempt, or malware, you might want to get a text alert for that instead. I'm just going to leave it as email. And then, of course, it gives me my governance options at this point, where I can actually suspend the account, or I can require the login, or I could do both. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do both. You would just pick one or the other. But for this one, I'm going to say suspend user. I'm going to uncheck that in a minute because it is my account. I don't want it to do that. If I wanted to, I could actually choose an account. I could go through and say, well, actually, I'm looking for a specific user, and I can, pick the admin account, let's say. And anytime the admin account is trying to make changes to Exchange in a certain period, I'm going to send me a notification, and I'm going to suspend the admin account. Now, of course, we're not going to do that in reality. You wouldn't do that with the admin account, but you get the idea of being able to do this. Now, what you have here is you have the ability to edit and preview the results. So what this means is you can actually test and see if you have any existing information that meets that, which for me does not. but you could test it and say, hey, I'm creating this new rule. I want to know if it's going to capture any of the information, and you can obviously review that, make changes to it. I could come in and say, actually, if I don't want to do that one, I could say folder sharing requests, and you can just keep testing and testing and testing until you find and craft the filter that you wish to use. I can then click Save Filters, and this will update the one in the background, because there's nothing worse than creating a filter, then trying to hope it works. It's great that you can just edit and preview the results that are right here. So I'm actually going to uncheck my suspend. I'm going to click Create. This will now go ahead, and you'll see my test policy has now been created. So right from here, I get the ability to obviously edit that back, or of course I can come in and just say disable or delete. But now those policies are in place. When we come into the activity log, over time, the policies will be captured as it tracks user interaction. It will then populate the alerts, and you'll be able to see. So for example, our new alerts just popped up because I created a brand new policy. If I click this, you'll see that I created a test policy, and you can see the information of the user that did that. So this gives you a great insight into what end users are doing, as well as administrators are doing within the system. Now the filtering and advanced option, if we click on advanced, it goes back to this idea of where I can plus and minus. If we click back in basic, then of course we have categories that I can click into. So I can say, well, I want to look at just those that are threat detection. I can then change the severity from low to medium to high, and obviously depending on what you've chosen, it will display those. I can then look and say, well, I want this specific app. So I can say I want Microsoft SharePoint, so I'm looking for things that are a threat detection that are for Microsoft SharePoint Online. And then actually what I want to do is just say I'd like to maybe do new advanced security management. And of course, notice that filter doesn't work because I obviously need to include advanced security management and maybe uncheck, and then maybe check, well, it's not a threat detection, it's probably going to be a configuration control, and then it shows up. So you can craft very interesting queries to bring back the information. Now, of course, you can set the information that comes back, the number of rows. I can obviously click Show and Hide the filters, but more importantly, I can also export, and this will bring back a CSV file, which obviously will contain that same information available here. So you'll see it's got the same sets of fields, and it's available to me here. So I can download that to run offline queries as I need. So you have the best of both. I can define them here in the nice UI, or I can export it, drop it into Excel. I could even take this data and utilize it in Power BI and create nice dashboards. Now what you also have is the ability to create a productivity discovery board, and you can say create a new report. Now in advanced security management, you are limited. This isn't information that's from the log that you have, but one of the features is you have the ability to upload on-premises firewall information or logs directly into advanced security management. So remember that advanced security management is capturing information from the end users and activities as they are in the Office 365 tenant. But what it doesn't capture is traffic that's going through your firewall to Office 365 or accessing other applications. So you could actually, if we just scroll through the list, you can see there's a whole host. So if you're using Forefront Threat Management Gateway, you can actually go and get the gateway log files, actually browse, upload them into here, and then it'll take 24 hours, and then it will start to analyze, and you'll end up with a productivity app discovery report. And this will combine the information that you've got. So if I click View Sample Report, this will give you a larger view. You'll see that it will start to categorize applications that end users have tried to use, whether it's, for example, you can see OneDrive, Dropbox, whatever it would be, as well as other information that's then tied. Once this information is in there, you can then obviously define a policy based on filtering of the activity log. Now, obviously, you don't have to manually update some of those. You can also choose some of the admin sites, and you can use SIEM agents to be able to bring information directly in. What you can also do is enrich the data by specifying IP address ranges. Now, obviously, I haven't done this for here, but if you have very specific IP address ranges for your organization and Office locations, you can add those IP address ranges, give them a tag, so that when you are actually looking at your activity log, you can then define policies based on, well, I would like to see all traffic from my California office or my Chicago office or a specific place. So you can define those. You can also define user groups that you can bring in. So I can actually import a user group from my Azure AD / Office 365, and then I'm able to filter that information based on the tagged groups as well. So it's all about enriching the activity log. The activity log is very much just a log of information that it captures from all of the services within Office 365. As you upload content from on-premises, and as you add the security groups, and as you bring in the ranges, it will then enrich that information to give you a better view, kind of a more holistic view of all the traffic and the activities that are going on within there. Now, our last thing on here is obviously based on the search. I can actually create a policy from here. So if I wanted to capture, traffic that was from American Samoa, I don't have any, but I could literally say new policy from search. And so I could do the search first, and you'll see it populates this automatically for me. So you have two different ways of doing it. You either define the policy and add it in, or you let Office 365 capture all the information, then you create searches and then define policies based on that one. But all policies are really based around alerts and notification that you can see here, allowing you to inspect and look at the information that's there. So let's go back here. So our last takeaway, apart from going through the site, is really just purchase and assign the licenses. The minimum setup that you would want to go for is to at least set up alerts. Even if you're not blocking end users, at least get notified of what's going on with your end users. A powerful option is to combine it with the audit log searching capability that's also available in the Security and Compliance Center. What that means is that you can receive an alert that something happened. You can then know that, hey, it was Liam that did something, and this was the parameters. I can then drop to the Security and Compliance Center, click on audit log, and then put in that kind of criteria to look a bit more in detail of what I was doing inside that log, not just capturing policy alerts from outside. And then, of course, utilize the on-premises log. If you want to enrich it and add more information, then the on-premises log is where you want to add that information. Okay, so I'll open it for questions.
All right. Thanks, Liam. We did have a question about the recording. The recording will be on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/FortivitySP. If you have any questions, insert them in the question window. We do have a question here. I have read about the Microsoft Cloud App Security as well as Advanced Security Management in Office 365. What's the difference?
So the Advanced Security Management piece is the one that's bolted directly into Office 365 and comes either as part of the E5 license or as the additional $3 license on top. It's very limited to the applications that it can see, which are really Office 365 components. The Cloud App Security is, I suppose, the Advanced Security Management's big brother, which is more of an Azure component that actually will allow you to inspect and connect to over 13,000 other applications and to offer security ratings for those applications. It also provides not just the same features as ASM, it provides other components over the top. So when you go into the user interface, you're actually able to create greater kind of granular policies as well as control access all the way through into the Azure AD components for the accounts. It comes as a different cost. It's part of the EMS and the security license that's also an addition to E5. So when you're looking at licensing, you'll just need to make sure that you get the right license. If you want just ASM for 365, that's all you need. If you want the Cloud App Security for the more detailed inspection of all the applications, those 13,000, then that's a separate license too.
Okay, great. Do I need to license all users in my organization for Advanced Security Management or just the IT staff that will be accessing the administration console?
Okay, so right now you have to license every single user in the organization. So if you have 1,000 users and you have issued E3 licenses to them, and then you have, let's say, 5 IT staff and you've given them E5 licensing so that they can get access to everything, even though Advanced Security Management is retrieving all of the information about all users automatically, and as an E5 user in the IT group, you can see that you legitimately have to purchase a license, pay that extra $3 per user for all of those 1,000 users so that you are licensed correctly, or you just upgrade them to an E5 license. Obviously, it comes down to cost, but right now, that's the official licensing model. You have to license every single user for Advanced Security Management.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions that we have today. Thank you, Liam, for the great presentation.
Anytime.
And thanks everyone for attending today. Again, you can rewatch today's presentation on our YouTube channel. We will see you in 2 weeks. Have a great day, everyone.